Charles Haddon Spurgeon, 1834 to 1892. Young man, you are in trouble. The thin lay preacher leaned over the pulpit, pointing a finger at the shivering youth. It was bitter cold on December the 15th, 1850, and Charles Haddon Spurgeon had stepped into the nearby primitive Methodist chapel for the Sunday evening service to get out of the miserable weather. Even the regular minister of the chapel had not braved the frigid elements, and so, in his absence, the lay preacher had stepped into the pulpit and gave out his text, "Look unto me, and be ye saved, all the ends of the earth." Isaiah chapter 45, verse 22. Then he peered out over the handful of attendees and fixed his eyes on young Spurgeon. "Young man, you are in trouble," he said, "and you will never get out of it unless you look to Christ. Look, look, look." Spurgeon later recounted his response to the untrained lay preacher. "I saw at once the way of salvation. Oh, how I did leap for joy at that moment." He went on to say that he remembered nothing else of the man's sermon. "I looked until I could have almost looked my eyes away, and in heaven I will look on still in my joy unutterable." Early childhood and education. Charles Haddon Spurgeon was born June the 19th, 1834, at Kelvedon in Essex, England, where his father served as a Congregationalist minister. The Spurgeon family had a long history of generational Christian faithfulness and piety. Charles was a bright boy from his earliest days and loved reading books, especially Robinson Crusoe and John Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress. Late in life, Spurgeon estimated that he had read Bunyan's spiritual classic more than 100 times. Young Charles learned to make sermons early in life. He watched his father prepare to preach and also sat for hours observing in his grandfather's study as he placed the finishing touches on his weekly sermons. When he was only 7, Charles gathered his siblings around him in the barn, mounted the hay rack, and, with flair and vigour, delivered his earliest expositions to his brother James, his sisters, and to the cows. This childhood play might have been more formative than it first appears. "You do not thoroughly know any truth," Spurgeon later told young men training to be preachers, "till you can put it before a child so that he can see it." Spurgeon's earliest formal education took place in private schools in Colchester. A Mr. Leading was an able tutor who taught Charles French, Latin, and Greek. Mr. Leading later described Spurgeon as one of his most capable young students, who, had he not been a nonconformist, might have gone on and excelled as a scholar at one of the Anglican universities. Nonconformists were English Protestant Christians who did not conform to the worship of the Church of England. They attended churches, which they called chapels, of their own choosing. As such, they were barred by law from the nation's universities. At 14, Charles and his brother James studied at an agricultural college in Maidstone, and after that at a school in Newmarket, Suffolk, a town famous for horse racing. It didn't take long for Charles to be made an usher or tutor for younger students. A fellow student described Spurgeon's teenage appearance. He was rather small and delicate, with pale but plump face, dark brown eyes and hair, and a bright, lively manner with a never-failing flow of conversation. He was rather deficient in muscle, did not care for cricket or other athletic games, and was timid at meeting cattle on the roads. Spurgeon's fellow student went on, however, to describe how earnest and conscientious he was, and how he would memorize lengthy passages from Puritan sermons and recite them with gusto. Spurgeon also committed to memory long passages of Bunyan's Grace Abounding to the Chief of Sinners, and would deliver them to his fellow scholars. It was at this stage in Spurgeon's young life that he threw himself into proclaiming the gospel to the lost.